Okay, we are starting. I'm going to go ahead and go in my classroom on my Patreon, and I'm going to turn on my microphone. The problem with that is that I may hear somebody else's microphone whenever I turn on. I need to set this up to where the classroom, hide names, mute channel, no, open chat, no. Create voice channel, duplicate channel, edit channel. Let's see here. Let me edit this channel. See if I can do a restrict to where you come in and you're automatically muted. I know I can. Voice channel. Okay. So this classroom I'm in on my Discord. I'm in Discord, and I have got a Credo House. You go to Credo House, Discord, Credo House. Look for that. And let's see here. Open chat, edit channels. I don't know whether you come in, if your voice is there or not. Join voice, general. No one is currently in voice. I'm joining voice, and I will have to leave if people come in and I hear them. Turn off microphone. No. Let's just turn off microphone. How about this? Deafen. There we go. Maybe, no. Because if I deafen myself, I don't know. I'm not sure how to do that. But I am in Discord. And I'm going to choose an activity. Watch this. I'm going to try to go to Credo House on YouTube. And then you can watch it from my Discord, possibly. So, Credo House. Let's see if it shows me live. Nope. No live. See, I don't know why it doesn't have live. I'm never live on my Credo House channel. Let's see if Camaro Theologian. See if that works. Camaro Theologian, am I live? I can't tell. I don't know. One of these days I'll figure this out, because we should be able to watch the live version of this in Discord. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this out, leave activity, and I'm just going to keep the room open. So you can come in the room if you want. I'm not sure if it'll make a noise. If it does, I'll have to mute the channel or turn off the channel. But that's on my Discord, Credo House Discord. That's where I'm at there. Other than that, you can still type a message. Hey, Nathan, good to see you. You can still type a message just like Nathan did. And I wish this session was interactive. I really do, because there's so much to it. There's so many questions. I know there's questions about everything, but this one especially, it's just driven on interaction, discussion back, me asking you questions. I'm going to try to do the best I can and pull off a Pauline diatribe, which means, like Paul did in Romans. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? You will say to me, someone will say, shall we continue to sin that grace might increase? That kind of thing. We'll see. If Paul did it, must be pretty good. Okay. No, I shouldn't finish this coffee. I'm too warm as it is. I'm going to try to keep this air on this time, because it is so hot in here. And if I keep the air on, I know it's going to come through, but I've tried to put a deafener on this. And so this will be the one recording that kind of maybe has a buzz in the background. If it does, I hope it doesn't. Let's get started. All right, 44. Welcome to Theology Unplugged. I'm Michael Patton, and this is session number 44 of our Through Theology in a Year. I'm really excited to have you. If this is your first time, stick around. You don't have to go through all of the sessions. There are 43 before this, and I'd love for you to catch up. Go to the channel on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever you're at. There's 43 more of these that you can catch up on and get to where we're at. But all of these are self-contained, so you're welcome to jump in at any time you want. That's what most people are going to do. You're going to come in here and you're going to hang out, and maybe you come back later on. Maybe you watch 3 or 4 of these, and then hopefully sometime you will commit and start watching all of these, because we are systematically going through all of theology in a year. We're going to try to do it. We'll see if we pull it off. If we don't, we'll adjust next year. It's going to be hopefully a yearly thing. We'll see. But I love doing it. I really do, because it keeps me sharp in theology. I've already gone through this entire thing before many, many times. I don't know, 90 times probably, because I teach a course called Introduction to Theology, Prolegomena. In the description, you will find a place you can go to, the Credo Courses tab. Our link. There is a place you can go to see the 60 sessions of systematic theology that I have not only taught and recorded and have it on audio and video, but I have the PowerPoint and I have workbooks along with discussion questions and everything else. So you can take it's a shorter version of this. I mean, obviously it's not a year long. It's 60 sessions, and there's 6 courses, so 10 sessions apiece. You can take your class through an individual course. You can take your Sunday school through an individual course. You can take your small group, whatever it is you want to get somebody at home. You and your wife go through this, however you want to do it. It's great. You can buy the courses over there for an inexpensive amount for the entire thing. So go over there and check, and you'll see the theology program. Get the entire thing. I don't just get one class, get the entire thing and start going through it with other people. It is a great interactive. Everybody that does it, I get good feedback on. I'm not just saying that. I really do. I mean, it's especially the intro class. People love the intro class. So do that. And don't forget, come over to my Patreon, and you can get it all for free. For $25 a month, you not only support me, support what we're doing, support what I'm doing here, support all the ministries that I have, whether it is Credo, the blog, or building of the Credo House Coffee Shop, which is a theological coffee shop. That is a way you can support me. That is the way I make my living. So go over there and look at the different levels and see what level you can support at. If you believe in what I'm doing, if you think what I'm doing is good for the kingdom, please think about it. Okay, today we are starting on our traditions in theology. Now, this is a fun one. I'm telling you, this is a blast. I was saying beforehand to people how much I wish I had a more interactive element. I'm going to sometime, but with this particular class, it feeds off of interaction, because there are questions and answers. And what I'm trying to do here for the next I don't know how long this part's going to last. I'm going to try to get through Protestantism this session, Roman Catholicism next session, and then Eastern Orthodoxy the following session. We'll see if I get that done. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you to understand where each tradition in Christianity, how they view church history, ecclesiastical history, as we call it. And I'm going to do it from the perspective of the particular tradition. So today I am a Protestant. That's easy for me because I am a Protestant, so I don't have to act. But next time I will be arguing as a Roman Catholic, and I'm going to do everything I can to be fair and argue the exact way they would. That's my goal. That's my goal with every single thing we go through here in the through theology in a year. I'm trying to represent well. Honestly, I don't want any straw men. I want you to understand not only other positions than what I hold, like I said, Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, but even within Protestantism, I want you to see the best arguments for the other side. Remember, this is irenic theology. Irenic theology means we do things peacefully. It means we represent fairly. It means it is non-combative. There's a time for combative polemics. Whenever you're into polemics, that's whenever you fight for your side. There's a time for that. There's a time for apologetics, and we do go through apologetics during this whole systematic theology. But whenever we come to other positions, you've got to know them. I've got to take the risk that you will not agree with me because there's a better argument for another position. And let me tell you something. You will see, whenever you look at the Roman Catholic position and the Protestant position, or anything else that is, in the historic Christian faith, what you're going to see is there's reasons why people are the way they are. They don't, sometimes you think, well, they just grew up that way and that's it. Many times that's true. Many times we grow up in a tradition, and whenever we're older, that's who we are. That's our identity. And our identity is connected to our history, to our parents, to our local church. But people who have been able to back up and look at things, there are good arguments for all these different positions. And I want you to know those good arguments, and I want you to wrestle with them. I want you to consider that you, whatever, may be wrong. Whatever position you currently hold to might be the wrong position. Remember, that's part of what we have to do as we move forward in this program. You have to consider that you might be wrong. I know it's hard, but do it, okay? If you're a Catholic and you're watching this, consider I might be right, okay? I'm a Protestant today. Here we go. Before we get into that, I want to talk about a couple of things here. I just want to give you an overview. This is really interesting. Watch this. Okay, so we're in traditions in Christian theology here. Let's see if I can put myself in it. There we go. We're in traditions in Christian theology. We're going to look at your roots. Again, it is a bird's eye view, as big a picture as I can get, but at the same time, making a legitimate, strong argument for the position. And I want to know, what is the essential difference between Protestantism, Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodoxy? Now, having said that, there are those three traditions. Most of us, if you're like me, if you're in America, the tradition that you know the least about is what? It's easy. Which tradition do you know least about among the three? Probably Eastern Orthodoxy, because in America, Eastern Orthodoxy is not that big. Other countries, it is. Other parts of the world, it is. But here in America, it's primarily either Protestant, especially down in the South, or on the East Coast, you have Roman Catholicism, and then a mixture across the country. But those are the two you usually know most about. So I'm excited to present the Eastern Orthodox position. I should have renumbered these because we're really starting with Protestantism, going to Eastern or Roman Catholicism, then going to Eastern Orthodoxy. Whenever I first taught this in 2004, let's see here, let me get myself out of the picture. Whenever I first taught this in 2004, these were the numbers. I thought this was really interesting. I had deleted this, but then I said, I'm going to put it back up there because it's interesting to see the difference. This is 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Protestants were 349 million. Roman Catholics were 943 million, just about a billion. And Eastern Orthodoxy was 211 million. It's interesting how close the Protestant and Eastern Orthodoxy is together. Protestantism, at least in 2004, was only around 100,000 more than Eastern Orthodoxy, whereas the mammoth was Roman Catholicism. Now you move forward 20 years. Watch this. Look at this change. 2024, Protestantism is now 900 million. Roman Catholic, and that, of course, that goes along with the population growth, and population has been growing quite quickly. So you may be able to add, 0.5 billion, maybe a little bit more to the scale. But at the same time, look at this. I mean, it's interesting how much Protestantism has grown, nearly 300%, compared to how much Roman Catholicism has grown, about 30%. And then look at Eastern Orthodoxy. Let's go back and look. 211 to 220. So I don't even know the percentage there. I don't know how to percentage that out, but it ain't much. I mean, probably just 1% or so. It tells you something about those traditions as we move through this. The big picture, it tells you something about them. And it may tell you enough right off the bat to see which one grows because of what you're focused on whenever you think of your Christian faith. But Protestantism has grown quite a bit over the last 20 years, especially whenever you're talking about in the East and in Africa, and whenever we're talking about evangelicalism and more of a charismatic type movement going on in South Africa or in Africa. Lots of change, lots of converts. So it's interesting. There's a lot to say about that, but I just thought I would bring that up and show you the differences. I don't know. I mean, maybe in 20 years, Protestants will outnumber Roman Catholics. That would be interesting. Okay, so let's look at this. What is the Protestant view of church history? That is our question for today. How do Protestants view the big picture church history? Now, if you're a Protestant, here's what I want you to do, okay? You've got to think much bigger than sometimes we often think. Often, whenever you think of church history, ecclesiastical history, you remember, your last building campaign or something, that went on at the church. Your church moved from this corner over to this big building, and you're really excited about it. That is true. I mean, that's part of your history. But Protestants often, and I hate to jump on Protestants because, I mean, every tradition has their nominal believers that don't know anything about history at all. And I would imagine that nominal believers that don't know anything about history at all is probably pretty close in each one of those, except maybe Eastern Orthodoxy, because if you're an Eastern Orthodox, more than likely you have a higher chance of knowing why you are there and the history of it. It's just a guess. I'll tell you why whenever we get there, but I'm not going to jump on Protestants before I start representing them, because we're all like this. We all don't know our history. Now, if you're a Protestant, here's what I want you to do, and some of you do. Some of you do. I'm not saying all of you. I'm sorry. Some of you know your history very well, and some Catholics do, and as well. All traditions have their few that are very, very connected, very, very theologically minded. And I'm not saying everybody has to be the same theologically minded. I just want you to have gone through this and understand it. Understand this, okay? From a Protestant standpoint, the church history is our lineage. It is not the lineage of the church that went before us, and our only lineage is our family and our local church. It is not even the lineage since the Reformation. It's not as if we believe the church started in the 16th century whenever Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the castle doors of Wittenberg. We believe we have connections all the way back to the apostles, just like everybody else. We believe that is our family. We believe, we are highly historical Christians because we believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. So I don't want you to ever think this way. I don't want you to ever think them that went before us, those Roman Catholics or those ancient Christians who didn't really read their Bible that much or something like that. Sometimes this is the view we have. It's them and then it's us. That is all of us. You are part of their family. No matter what they were doing or how messed up they were or how abusive they were, that is your family. And you've got to find yourself in that. You've got to, theologically, if you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit, if you believe the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, then the gates of hell have never prevailed against the church until today. So one of the greatest things that we can do is go back in history and see our history and try to understand it. Try to understand what went wrong, what were the major moves, what went right, who were our big-time family members, who were the ones that were influential in making changes, who were the ones who messed things up, who were part of our family, yet they were just kind of weird parts of our family. That's the way I want you to think. The church history is your history. I want you to become deeply, deeply involved in history because it's so important for your theology. That's my argument I make today, but I want you to do that generally. And now we're going to look at a view, an overview, what happened in church history. Okay, so from the Protestant view, and I've got a little chart that I'm going to walk through here. I remade this chart from the theology program. Those of you who have been through the theology program may see some changes, may see some differences, but generally speaking, I've kept it the same because I like the way I did it. At first, what I did was I started this timeline, and I had it so packed full of stuff because I get excited. I start looking at the early church and I start saying, oh, I got to tell them about this. Oh, I got to tell them about this church father. Oh, I got to tell them about this council. I got to tell them about, on and on you can go. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is for the rest of the program. The entire program, we will be dealing with church history whenever it comes to individual things that we are talking about. But I cannot talk about them all today. All I can do is give you this big, brief, bird's eye overview. Forest, no trees. Maybe a little bit of trees. I like trees just a little bit every once in a while. Okay. Okay, so here's our timeline, right? Timeline doesn't say anything. Here's the first thing that I want you to see in the timeline, the apostolic deposit. This is something you're going to see in every timeline, the apostolic deposit. Now, from a Protestant standpoint, most of y'all may not be familiar with this terminology. Again, I don't mean to just jump all over Protestants because most people in any tradition wouldn't. But this is more important whenever you're talking about Roman Catholicism because, well, you'll see. But anyway, we believe that there was an apostolic deposit. And what we mean by that is that Christ came, he appointed and taught apostles. And then he commissioned those apostles after he gave them now what we call the apostolic deposit, the deposit of our faith, the deposit of the gospel. He taught them, and then he told them to go teach others everything that he has taught them. So the apostles have it. The apostles, 12 apostles have this authority, and they move forward. And that's what we see in the book of Acts. The book of Acts is the history of the church. The rest is mainly just letters and the story of Jesus. But the book of Acts goes through the entire history of the church as much as God wanted us to have inspired. So we have the apostolic deposit being delivered during the book of Acts. And so what we're going to look at, we're going to say, what happened to that apostolic deposit after the after the 12 apostles died? What happened? It doesn't just jump to us. There's all kinds of action that goes on. Great action, incredible action, fun stuff. But let's look at it big picture. Okay, so first thing you want to see here is this. This is so incredibly essential. That is the timeline. That arrow is the timeline. The timeline in this is the church because it's ecclesiastical history. But the timeline, very important to see, is defined by the gospel. To the degree that the gospel is contained within this line, wherever the gospel's at, is the timeline. In other words, wherever the church is the gospel. You cannot have the true church without the gospel. The gospel, the good news, the story of Christ, this essential apostolic deposit defines the church. Okay? Not the other way around. The church does not define the gospel for a Protestant, and you'll see the significance of that later, but the gospel defines the church. Okay. Now we move on and we say, what's the first step? What is the first movement that happened in church history? Well, you have the age of the apostles and the advancement. The age, I'm sorry, I remade this. Remember I told you I remade this? That should be the age apostles? That doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to change that. That looks bad there. The age of, let's just put the apostolic fathers. That's what I should have put. I don't know why I said age of the apostles. Maybe I thought I was going before. Anyway, this is the apostolic fathers, which basically means those few people, these few men and writings that go right after the apostles. I have them all up here, the apostolic fathers. I have a few volumes that are called the Apostolic Fathers. You can go on Amazon, you can go anywhere books are sold and search for the Apostolic Fathers, and it will be a little small corpus, a little small group of books that usually contain 6 or 7, 8, 9 books from certain people that came right after the apostles. Clement of Rome, Ignatius, Irenaeus sometimes is included in this, although he comes he sometimes isn't included with the Apostolic Fathers. But you've got Ignatius, Irenaeus, Clement. Who else is there? I can't even think right now. But anyway, you got a lot of great guys that are in there. Polycarp, that's another one. You got a lot of really great guys that came right after the apostles that if you can pick them up and you read them, and you can read their letters that they wrote just like Paul wrote, and you can read their defense of Christianity. You can read their encouragement to the church. This is the apostolic deposit that has been handed over and given to the apostles and then transferred over to the apostolic fathers. And you have the advancement of the gospel. Starting in 100, you have this spread, this massive spread throughout the Eastern Church and mainly the Western Empire of the gospel and therefore of the church. You had many converts. You had the persecutions. These first few hundred years did have sporadic and sometimes very, very bad persecutions of the church. But all this did was strengthen the church and grow the church. As Tertullian said, he wasn't really a church father. He was a little bit further down. Like I said, it's a corpus called the Apostolic Fathers, and I don't know how you get into that corpus, but there's lots of guys. Tertullian was one of them. Tertullian wrote around 250, I think, and Tertullian said the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. In other words, every time somebody died for their faith, which they did, they hung on crosses, they went to the Colosseums, they were eaten by wild animals. There was major sporadic persecutions, but every time people would see the conduct of these new converts, these people who had received the gospel, these people who had believed the gospel and trusted Christ, and they saw their perseverance in their faith, and it changed the world. It really did. It changed the world. It changed the world more dramatically than possibly any time in history. I can't think of any time that the gospel has had such an incredible effect. That's why this is called the age of advancement. You have the gospel advancing radically throughout the empire. Next, you have the councils. Now, there's more to it than this, but let me give you just a basic, again, overview. Around 311, you have what is called the Edict of Milan. The Edict of Milan was Emperor Constantine's legalization of Christianity. He legalized Christianity, him and I think it was Licinius or I forget who it was, the empire in the East at the time, but they both got together and legalized Christianity. And whenever they legalized Christianity, suddenly, for the first time, all the Christians could come together and talk. They could discuss openly. And, just as importantly, they could have councils. At first, you have the age of advancement, but in the age of advancement, you don't have the articulation of the faith. As the gospel has been delivered, people start having questions, and there's starting to be disagreements on secondary issues and sometimes primary issues. People are saying, okay, we believe that Christ is God, but wait a minute. Don't we think the Father is God? And didn't he pray to the Father? And so how can they both be God and Christ talking to him and him talking from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased? Who is this Holy Spirit that Christ talks about in John chapter 16 that he's sending, this paraclete, that he is sending on our behalf, that it's better for Christ to go away because the Holy Spirit will come? Why does he call him a he? There's all these questions that come out. Everybody believed it, or the church believed it, but there were people that started to say, wait a minute, I'm going to come up with a different theory. You know, let's say instead of Christ being a separate from the Father and the Holy Spirit being separate from both of them, let's just say they're all one person and that they just did different things, had different roles. Those types of things started coming up. Now, beforehand, they couldn't get together in public the way they can now. Christianity is legalized, so now you have this time where all of the church starts to get together. Constantine legalized Christianity in 311. Later on, he said, you know what? After he had the entire empire to himself, the East and the West, he said, you know what? I think that since Christianity is such a powerful force, number one, I'm going to become a Christian. That's what Emperor Constantine. Number two, I need them to be together and to be strong because it is for the sake of the empire. So he had this council. I think I talked to you about it before a while back, but it was called the Council of Nicaea in 325. So you have the legalization, and in 325 you have the Council of Nicaea in modern-day Istanbul. And so all of these Christians got together and declared what the Trinity was, declared it like we have it today, said the other people were wrong, said, here's the definition of the Trinity. That worked out well. We started having more and more councils. Every time something came up, every time there was a problem, major problem, we would get together with the church all over the empire. Usually the emperor would fund this, and they would get together and discuss and come up with a new creed or definition so that Christians would know what to believe, so that the bishops could take it back home and have it in articulated form. So the councils were really great from a Protestant standpoint. Here's the way we think of it. The councils were really great, and we agree with some of the councils. Normally that's what we'll say, some of them. Sometimes it goes up to 6 councils. The 7th council, usually Protestants don't agree with. It's not against being a Protestant, but there were 7 ecumenical councils from 325 to 787. What I mean by that is this. For those 400 years, there were 7 times where the entirety of the church got together and discussed an issue. After that, the church has not gotten together. Since 787, there has not been an ecumenical council from a Protestant standpoint. Okay? Now, what did we discuss? The first one, it was the Trinity. The second one, it was the Trinity. We kind of further formulated it, made some adjustments, and put the Holy Spirit in there. The next one, we talked about Christ and his nature in 425. We talked about how Christ could be one person, yet 2 natures. So we articulated that. And then we just go on and on with a few other councils that are more just kind of massaging those things until the 7th council, which is talking about iconoclasts or the veneration of icons. That's where we say, no, we bow out because we don't venerate icons. We think it is idolatry. That's why we don't accept the 7th council. Usually we'll say, listen, the Council of Nicaea and its update in 431 at Ephesus at the 2nd council, that's us. Protestants also agree with the 3rd ecumenical council and the 4th ecumenical council. Those councils are all good. Usually after that, it starts going downhill. It starts becoming redundant and unnecessary and burdensome. From a Protestant standpoint, these councils are not inspired, but we do believe they are very good because they show how the church is articulating the gospel. The gospel from the apostolic deposit is inspired. The church is now learning about it, understanding it, having disagreements, but coming to conclusions on it. And this is a very good thing. That is us. That is us. We go back and we made some mistakes. The church made some mistakes, and we corrected them, and we find our deep roots here. Now, something happens. We start to have the Dark Ages. Around 600, you have the Dark Ages. Now, notice here, you got advancement, articulation. Now, the Dark Ages is represented by abuse. What happened? I'm going to put it as we, okay? Because it's us. Remember, Don't forget, this is us. It's not them. Okay? Here's what we did. And we thought it was a really good thing. We said, man, let me tell you something. We're really doing well with these councils. It's great that the church has this power. In around 800 AD, you have the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, who he is called by this time, crowning Charlemagne on Christmas Day, the emperor of the Western Empire. So you have the Pope crowning the emperor. What does that mean? The Pope was the one who had the power to approve the emperor. The emperor went to the Pope, bowed down before the Pope, and said, approve me. That's how much power the church had gained. Now, for us as Protestants, we're kind of like scratching our head. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe this is what God wants. Obviously, we've had all these councils, and we're able to keep control, at least to some degree, of the church. So we're thinking maybe this is a good idea, that there's this much power within the church. The institutional church that is building at this time. You see, during the articulation time, you have the laity separated from the clergy much, much more. The clergy was represented by the bishops all around the world. They were the ones attending the councils. They were the one disseminating the gospel, telling you what to believe, what not to believe. And at the same time, they were the ones who had the Bibles. But we started being careful, and this is what we did. We thought, listen, it is dangerous for people to read the Bible. Let's let the church do it. Let's let the bishops do it, because that will keep control of things. Otherwise, it's just mayhem in the church. Everybody has their own interpretation. So let's go ahead and leave it with the bishops, leave it with the councils, leave it with the institution of the church. That was our idea at that time. All of our idea. Because there was no Protestant, Catholic, and Eastern Orthodox at this time. It was all of us. We were one family, right? It was all the Catholic Church. Catholic Church, I mean, it was different. They don't think of it in the same way as you do Roman Catholic. Catholic means universal. So the Catholic Church is the original church. So think of the entire timeline as the Catholic Church, because it's universal. It's not just for one particular crowd, one particular country, one particular race. It's universal for everybody. That's why we call it the Catholic Church, the universal church. It does become the Roman Catholic Church, which is an identity, which is somewhat of a, well, from a Protestant standpoint, is somewhat of a contradiction, because how can you have the Roman Universal Church, right? I mean, is it the Roman Church or is it the Universal Church? See what I'm saying? That's why Catholics don't even like that name, so I'll talk about that next time. But you have the Dark Ages, you have abuse. What happened? Well, we got control. And what happens every time humans get control? We abuse it. We don't handle it well. We just take more and more and more control. And this is what happened through the history of the church. So much so that you have the Bishop of Rome fighting with the Bishop of Constantinople, Istanbul versus Rome. And the Bishop of Constantinople is saying to the Bishop of Rome, hey, you can't tell us what to do. And the Bishop of Rome is saying, yes, I can, because Peter ordained me. And you remember how we went back with all of the church councils beforehand, and we said, we only believe what the apostolic deposit was, and we can only identify what the apostolic deposit was by showing the lineage of people. You see, the apostolic deposit, you can find it by saying, let's say you're in the 4th century and you're a bishop, you can trace who ordained you, who ordained him, who ordained him, who ordained him, all the way back to the apostles. They could, and they can. They can still do that today. Bishops in the church, the Eastern Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, and the Anglican Church can trace their lineage all the way back to the apostles. And here's what the Bishop of Rome did. He said, my lineage goes back to Peter, and Peter is the head of the church. And the Bishop of Constantinople saying, no. Yeah, why do you think that you have more power than us? You don't have more authority to us. You have an honor of first among equals, but it is equal. And so there started to be infighting. The Church of Rome started doing things their own way. They started saying, hey, we're in control. So this is part of our family, right? This is before any breakups. This is one family. This is us. This is Catholic Church. And we have fighting going on inside of our family. One side says, you have to do what I tell you. Yeah, you ever had any brothers and sisters like that? You ever been a brother and sister like that? I know whenever I look in my family, the oldest usually is like, they have to do what I say. If you guys go somewhere, mom and dad, and you expect us to stay here together, tell them they have to do what I say. You ever been like that? Well, that's the way we are. That's the way it was. Let's put it in one person's hands. Let's don't have this community of bishops that are all equal. We're never going to agree. Finally, we have to have it in one person's hands, and that's what the Pope thought he was. That's what the Pope believed he was. Now, we don't believe that as Protestants, but at the same time, here we are watching our family break up. And what happens? Well, the Bishop of Rome, remember there was the first council, the Council of Nicaea in 325, the first creed, the creed we agree with, because it talks about the Trinity, but it talks about the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father, right? The Holy Spirit comes from the Father. That's what it says in that first document that was written in 325 and added to in 381. 381, they said the Holy Spirit comes from the Father. He proceeds from the Father, okay? Now, after a while, you had the Western Church, the Church of Rome, say, you know what? Give me that document, that Nicene Creed that we were all together, every one of us, way back in 325, we all agreed upon. Give me that, and I am going to add something to it, okay? I'm going to add, in the Western Church, the Pope says, I'm going to add filioque. Filioque is the Latin for and the Son. So the Pope or the Western Church or the Roman Church took it upon himself and said, I can add to an ecumenical creed that was established by the entire church. I can change it. That was a pretty big deal. I mean, how can you say you can go back and change a document we all agreed upon a long time ago? You don't have that authority. Yes, I do. Filioque and the Son. This and the Son, it's called the Filioque controversy, became massive in the church. It was so serious. I mean, and you got to think of it as this. It wasn't just because the Pope added and the Son. Because, I mean, there's arguments today, and you can talk to Eastern Orthodox, and they'll say, yeah, it is. It's a theological thing. It's not so much a theological thing. We look back and we say, the Eastern Church is really mad because the Western Church was arrogant. The Western Church thought they could do this. Now, it wasn't just that the Western Church thought they could do this, but they thought they could enforce it upon all the other churches in the empire. All the other bishops had to agree now with the filioque, the and the Son. But they didn't. So there was that was going on. That is often used as a good representation of the battle, the infighting. So there's a battle going on with the Eastern Church and the Western Church. There's more. It's more than that. Much more than that, though. Like I said, the Western Church taking the authority, the Pope telling all the other bishops what to do, especially the Bishop of Constantinople. And you have a difference in thinking. Really, you'll see a massive difference in thinking, especially when we talk about the Eastern Church in a while. But remember when we talked about this whole idea of apophatic theology? Apophatic theology, a theology of mystery, compared to cataphatic theology, a theology of revelation. Two ways of thinking. The apophatic theology said, well, let's don't try to define God because he's too big and we're too small and we'll misdefine him. Cataphatic theology says, yes, let's try to define God because he's all powerful, and if he's all powerful, he can reveal himself to us. He's powerful enough to do that. So you had kind of clashing. And as I said before, you got to keep a balance of those two. Okay, it's very important in our theology to understand there is a time for apophatics and there is a time for cataphatics, if I could put it that way. But anyway, so the Eastern Church was all about mystery. The Western Church was all about revelation. And that's the thinking that exists to today. Even in the Eastern world, they're more kind of a mystery. And the Hindus and the Buddhists, they're all that way more than the Western world. The Western world is all information. It's understanding. It's science. It is let's dot all our I's and cross all our T's type thing. So it's totally different way of thinking at the time of the Dark Ages. And I call it the Dark Ages. It doesn't need to be called the Dark Ages. It just was an easy thing to do. But it kind of was dark. Church was in control. There was fighting. And so the Eastern Church and the Western Church fought until finally in 1054, you have it came to a head. The Pope in Pope Leo the Ninth sent this guy named Cardinal Humbert. Was it Humbert? Yeah, Cardinal Humbert to the Eastern Church, and he said, "Listen, you go talk them into submitting to me." And so Cardinal Humbert comes all the way down. I don't think it's Humbert, but stick with me anyway. It doesn't matter. It's something like that. Cardinal Humbert comes all the way down to Constantinople, and there's discussion that goes on. And he's got all these documents, and he says, "Listen, the Pope sent me to tell you to submit." Now, Michael Cerularis, who was the Archbishop at the time in Constantinople, they didn't call it Pope. The Bishop of Constantinople is called the Bishop of Constantinople. The Bishop of Rome is now called the Pope, but they both work equals, at least in the mind of Michael Cerularis. So Cardinal Humbert comes down and discusses with Michael Cerularis and with his team. They're like, "You got to submit. You got to. This is the Pope we're talking about." And Humbert was not a nice guy. He was not a compromising guy. And so whenever Michael Cerularis said, "No, I will not submit to the Pope," on July 14th, he walks in while they are conducting service, while they're conducting liturgy and mass. He comes in and lays down on the altar a bull of excommunication from the Pope. So basically, the Pope gave him the authority to do that and said, "Hey, Humbert, you are excommunicated." Michael Cerularis, Bishop, Archbishop, Patriarch, Michael Cerularis, you have been excommunicated from the church. You get excommunicated from the church and you're done for. Because from the standpoint, as we'll see next, from their standpoint, you have to be in the church to have salvation. And so the last thing you want is excommunication from the Pope. And Michael Cerularis got this excommunication. Highly offensive during the liturgy to hand it off. Got this excommunication. Eventually, while Humbert was on his way home, Cerularis and the Eastern Church excommunicated Humbert. Okay? So you have the West excommunicating the East as represented by Michael Cerularis, and the East excommunicating the West as represented by Cardinal Humbert. And so that was a split. That is the iconic day when the Eastern Church and the Western Church split. It wasn't really official, but it was very iconic. The split had been coming no matter what. But and another interesting point, I tell you the story because it's so interesting, but Cardinal Humbert gets back and Pope Leo the Ninth had died. He had died. So it was like, okay, that excommunication didn't even count. No, interesting stuff. Either way, whether it counted or not, we were just messed up. Our family was, oh man, we had some mess up things. That's our point of view, right? So what do we have? Well, you have abuse, Dark Ages, and then finally you have this time where the Eastern Church says, "Hey, listen, I can't do this. We're out of here." Or from their standpoint, they say, "We're continuing on the true church, but from the Protestant standpoint, this is the way it looks. You have abuse going on and the Eastern Orthodox Church leaving. So now you've got the Eastern Church and the Western churches. That's the only thing you have there, the Eastern churches and the Western churches. Now, did anything get better? No, they didn't. I mean, at that point, whenever the Eastern Orthodox Church left, that's at the height of the papacy, the office of the Pope, the papacy's arrogance, and it just got worse and worse. I mean, especially now that we've separated. And they just got more and more arrogant. It's kind of like, a family member leaving, and it didn't help the family member that made them leave. They just get worse and worse. Well, that's what they get. They should have left. Good thing they left, because this is the way it is, and now we can get some stuff done. And the Western Church just keeps on holding councils and getting together. I mean, building their book of rules and regulations higher and higher. You see, the Eastern Church only has 7 ecumenical councils. The Western Church, as represented by Rome now, has 21 ecumenical councils. And so what happens here? We're looking at the family and we're saying this is going crazy. And you know what? We don't even see the gospel anymore. We've lost the gospel. The Dark Ages brought darkness to the gospel. I mean, all of a sudden it just becomes about the church and about these little side things, the filioque. We have lost the truth of the gospel as we've gone, and we've filled up our book of what we're supposed to believe with so many pages, you can't even flip around and find what was the essential gospel anymore. It's just been lost. You can't even do that because the church itself is the one who's in control of everything. So what happens with us? During this time, you start having people raise their hands and say, hey, listen, I've got some issues too. I mean, we don't have a Bible. Why can't we read the Bible? We've got the Bible started to be printed a little bit later on at the printing press, and everybody starts getting it, reading their Bible, and they rediscover. We see the gospel again for the first time. We are reading the Bible again for the first time. It's not as if the gospel was lost or Christ wasn't there. He was the whole time. It wasn't as if the church wasn't there because the gospel was there. But at the same time, it was just harder and harder to flip through all those pages and find the gospel. But it was still there, right? It was still there as long as you looked. And so you have the reformers come along in the 16th century. You have more disruption, and the reformers come along, and what do? They're saying, hey, we got the Bible, let's read it ourselves. Oh my gosh, this is not the way the church is supposed to be. So it is this awakening, this Reformation. Then the Reformation happened in the 16th century. 1516, you have in 1515, I believe it was, you have the first printing of the Greek New Testament after the printing press. And in 1516, what happens? Martin Luther nails the 95 Thesis to the castle doors of Wittenberg. That is the iconic move. That is the iconic time of the split in the Western Church. And so the Western Church splits between Protestantism and Roman Catholicism. And from the standpoint of Protestantism, the church has been carried on with us. Now, Protestants don't necessarily believe that the church is not found in Eastern Orthodoxy or Roman Catholicism. As a matter of fact, at the time of the Reformation, Martin Luther thought about becoming Eastern Orthodox because, there was a lot more agreement with them than there was with Rome from Martin Luther's standpoint. That's why you have Lutherans being that you can find some Eastern in them. You can find a little bit more apophatic theology in them. I'm very attracted to Lutherans in a lot of ways. I really am. But at the same time, I don't think they got it right. I don't think they got it exactly right. But none of us did. I don't have it exactly right. But that's one of the beauties of Protestantism. Protestantism is able to hold together without an authoritative saying, this is what you have to believe. And it's just a continual wrestling match with many doctrines, but at the same time seeing the same Christ throughout it all. The Christ is the gospel. The gospel is found in the church. Wherever the gospel is found, that is where the true church is found, no matter what you belong to. Institutions do not define the church. That is what Protestants would say. And so what you have is you have this awakening, and you have Martin Luther saying Christianity stands or falls upon the doctrine of justification. And John Calvin says justification is the hinge upon which true Christianity stands. I'm not going to be able to get into that much about what they mean there, but they're basically saying we lost the doctrine of justification. How is one justified? It became so burdensome to be able to become justified in the church. You had to do so much, all these sacraments, all this process that you were going through for justification. The reformers said, hey, wait a minute. It's just by faith. That's it. Justification is by faith alone, not by all these other things, including submission to the institutional church. And so that's why they put such a heavy emphasis upon justification. Now, if I were to say write this, I probably wouldn't put Christianity stands or falls on the doctrine of justification. I would say Christianity stands or falls upon Christ. Christ is the gospel. Our relationship to Christ, how we get to Christ, is the doctrine of justification, but Christ is the gospel. And if you have Christ, to the degree you have Christ, this is what Protestantism generally would say, to the degree you have Christ is the degree you have the gospel. And to the degree you have the gospel is to the degree you have the church. So the church timeline is not as clean. It doesn't go with the institution. It goes with Christ. It goes with how we come to Christ. And we are not saying as Protestants that Catholics can't be saved or Eastern Orthodox can't be saved. You will find some denominations in Protestantism that think that way, but that is not what Protestantism is about. Protestantism is about getting to Christ, not about an institution. If you are in an institution called the Roman Catholic Church, if you are truly trusting Christ, then you are part of the church, even though we would say, hey, you're not in a good church. You're not in a good situation. Here's a place you can go to. This is a really good book. I think if you're wanting to understand the strengths of Protestantism, now this isn't a small book. It really isn't. But if you are into books, you want a book and you want to understand Protestantism, get this book by Alistair McGrath. It's called Christianity's Dangerous Idea. It's a great book that helps you understand what Protestantism is all about and what are the strengths of Protestantism. Another one you can get here is Turning Points by Mark Knoll. Turning Points by Mark Knoll. Now, this one basically does the same thing I just did. It goes through the various turning points in history from a Protestant perspective. What are the major moves that the church takes? So let me get to the index here and tell you what turning points he lists. Let's see here. Okay, so you got, no wait, there's just so many. There's 13. He's got Christianity is pushed out on its own, the fall of Jerusalem, the Council of Nicaea, which I just talked about, Council of Chalcedon, which I talked about, Benedict's rule, the coronation of Charlemagne, I talked about that. So a lot of the same turning points you have, and it's written in a book here, and Mark Knoll is one of the foremost, greatest historians in the church today, recognized across the board. As a matter of fact, he's a Protestant who taught at Notre Dame. So that's how good he is. The Catholics had him come teach there because he's that good. But anyway, so that is a good way to follow up on this. I know we've gone a very long time, an hour. We needed it. I didn't want to start and go halfway through Protestantism and stop, just like I won't with Roman Catholicism. I've got my Protestant hat on today. It was easy for me to wear. Tomorrow, I'm going to be wearing my Catholic hat. That is going to be fun for me to wear, and it may be challenging to many of you who are Protestants, because I'm going to help you to understand from a Roman Catholic standpoint how they see that timeline and how they would defend the way they see that timeline, and it might surprise you. Okay, guys, don't forget to support. If you believe in what I'm doing, you like what I'm doing, go over here to my Patreon. Go over there and just take a picture of that, or put your camera up to that, click on the button that it shows, and go there and become a member. Or alternatively, you can go, let me see if this is up here. It's not. But you can go to credoministries.com. Wait, is it credoministries.com? credoministries.org. Yeah, that's it. credoministries.org. You go there and you can donate with tax-deductible donation, and that would be wonderful as well, if that's the way you would prefer to give. If you believe what I'm doing, you want to see it expand, you want to see me push this out there. Most of all, guys, listen to me. That's like Charles Stanley, listen. Okay, listen. Please like and share wherever you're at. Like and share. Comment. All of those things work with the algorithm. Let's get this thing kind of spread around. I think it's unique. I don't think anybody's doing anything like this the way and as comprehensively as I am, or ironically. So like and share, make a comment, whatever you can to help this to spread. Do your part there. That can be your part. That I'd love for your part to become joining us at our community. Remember, at my Patreon, if you have questions, if you have something you want me to talk about, a question you want me to answer, go to my Patreon and go down to the chat, and the first one up there is the question answer section. Put your question in there. On Fridays, I deal with the questions. That's how we're doing it right now. Okay, guys, thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope this was informative.